The Indiana Fever gambled on Natasha Howard's veteran presence, but it came at the cost of offensive cohesion. Her tendency to dominate the ball in transition, combined with low shooting efficiency, broke the rhythm of an offense meant to revolve around Caitlin Clark's court vision and perimeter threat. Instead of being a complementary piece, Howard too often occupied the same lanes Clark needed to create, bogging down movement and spacing. The result wasn't just missed shots, it was wasted possessions, stunted development, and a ceiling that never lifted. Clark's window for dominance won't last forever, and every season counts. That means the front office must approach roster decisions with surgical precision. Letting go of Howard isn't about disrespecting a champion. It's about refusing to compromise the system that Clark needs to thrive. If the Fever want to compete for titles, they can't afford sentimentality. They need forwards who shoot, defend, and move without the ball, traits Howard no longer consistently brings. The next chapter must prioritize fit over familiarity, or the franchise risks squandering its rarest asset. Caitlin Clark paid Natasha Howard's debts? Not exactly. But if you've seen the headlines swirling, you know the real story isn't about cash.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
It's about cost. And this one's hitting the Indiana Fever exactly where it hurts. The roster. The debt Clark is paying is strategic. It's systemic. And it's showing up every time the Fever step on the court with a team that still hasn't figured out how to build around the most impactful rookie in recent WNBA memory. And right at the center of that misalignment, Natasha Howard. Now, Howard has a resume, a legitimate one. She's a 3-time champion. She's known for durability. She's played real minutes on real contenders. But this isn't about what she's done. It's about what she does now. And what she doesn't do is complement Clark's game. Last season laid it bare. Howard shot just 18% from three-point range. That's not a slump. That's a problem. And when your franchise player is a generational passer who thrives on drawing defenders and kicking to shooters, that kind of inefficiency on the perimeter becomes a serious liability. Clark needs spacing. She needs teammates who can stretch the floor, hit open looks, and give her room to operate. Howard did the opposite. Her defender could sag 10 feet off her without consequence. That shrinks the floor, crowds the paint, and turns a dynamic offensive system into a slog. And that wasn't the only issue. Howard often stepped outside her ideal role, trying to dribble in transition, create her own shots, and operate like a primary scorer. Those decisions consistently broke offensive rhythm, stalled possessions, and took the ball out of the hands of the one player who should be controlling the game. This wasn't just a mismatch. It was a roster construction failure. The front office signed Howard knowing Clark was coming. They watched a modern offensive architect take over the WNBA and still build a lineup that ignored the basics of floor balance and offensive synergy. Howard's value lies in her veteran experience and physicality. But those traits don't outweigh the damage done by poor fit. When a player is shooting below 20% from deep in a system built around high IQ, past first guard, there's no version of that player that makes sense in your starting lineup, or even in your rotation. That's why the video calls it what it is, organizational malpractice. Because this isn't about effort. Howard gave everything. She was available. She played hard. But availability doesn't equal effectiveness. And loyalty to veteran presence should never come at the cost of team performance. Clark's window is now. Not 5 years from now. Not when the front office finally feels comfortable making moves. Now. And every decision should be rooted in that urgency. That includes letting Howard walk in free agency. This isn't about disrespecting her career. It's about recognizing the Fever's responsibility to build a roster that amplifies Clark's strengths. Howard's skill set simply does not do that. She doesn't stretch the floor. She doesn't operate well off the ball. And her decisions in transition actively hurt the team's pace and efficiency. The fact that Howard is a respected vet doesn't change that. In fact, that's part of the problem. The front office leaned too hard into leadership and experience and not enough into fit. That's a lesson championship teams don't have the luxury of ignoring. And Clark? She's not just any player. She's the kind of talent franchises tank for. The kind of passer who can run a championship offense if the system is built around her properly. That means shooting. That means length. That means defensive versatility. And that means no more experiments with players who don't align with her playstyle. Enter Ezra Stevens. Stevens is the archetype the Fever should be targeting. A stretch forward with size, shooting range, and defensive awareness. She moves well without the ball. She understands spacing. She doesn't demand touches, but she makes an impact. In short, she fits. That's the priority. Not reputation. Not comfort. Fit. Because the WNBA isn't forgiving. Roster mistakes don't just slow you down. They derail entire seasons. And in Clark's case, every wasted season is a missed chance at building something historic. When Howard played major minutes next to Clark, the offense didn't just stagnate, it regressed. Teams figured it out fast. Let Howard shoot, crowd Clark, and force someone else to beat you. That strategy worked. And unless the Fever make changes, it'll keep working. There's also the broader issue of decision-making. The front office didn't just roll the dice on Howard, they doubled down. They signed a player who doesn't shoot, doesn't stretch the floor, and needs the ball in ways that don't complement their star. That's not bad luck. That's bad planning. And now they've got a chance to correct it. To admit the mistake, pivot, and make the right move. Letting Howard go is step one. That doesn't mean she's done. Howard can absolutely help a different team. A slower team. A team that needs rebounding, toughness, and a veteran voice in the locker room. But she's not what the Fever need. Not anymore. Because this isn't about staying respectable. It's about contending. Clark has already changed the conversation around this franchise. She's drawing national media, selling out arenas, putting the Fever back on the map. Now the front office has to hold up their end. That means building a team that can win. Not next decade. Not after 2 more development years. Now, that kind of transformation doesn't happen by playing it safe. It happens when teams make bold, strategic decisions. When they stop leaning on veteran status as a crutch. When they build around today's game, not yesterday's. Durability is great, but it doesn't mean much if the player on the floor is consistently taking the offense out of rhythm. And that's exactly what happened with Howard last season. Her numbers speak for themselves. So does the film. The tape doesn't lie. Clark made plays. Howard didn't finish them. And when the system broke down, it wasn't because Clark was overpassing. It was because too many of those passes were going to players who weren't ready or capable of converting them into points. This offseason is the moment. The Fever have to decide if they're going to ride the same patterns or finally lean into what their franchise star needs. That means spacing. It means shooting. It means lineup flexibility. And it means moving on from players who don't check those boxes, regardless of resume. It's not about personal history. It's about professional reality. And right now, the reality is that Clark is paying the price for a roster that doesn't make sense around her. That debt is showing up in missed shots, stalled possessions, and close losses that didn't need to happen. That's on the front office. But they still have time to fix it. Let Howard explore opportunities elsewhere. Let the team bring in players like Ezra Stevens, modern, mobile, and moldable to Clark's strengths. That's how you build something real. That's how you build around a star instead of forcing her to adjust to outdated pieces. Because Clark isn't the one who should be adjusting. Everyone else should be adjusting to her. If you're with us on this, drop your thoughts in the comments. Is it time for the Fever to finally commit to fit over familiarity? Should they move on from Howard and start building a roster worthy of Clark's vision? Hit the like button, share this with someone who's been frustrated with the Fever's spacing all season, and subscribe. Because the next decision the front office makes could be the one that defines the entire Clark era. There's no more time for nostalgia. No more waiting for things to click. No more room for hopeful experiments in a system built around a generational passer. Caitlin Clark didn't come into the WNBA to babysit a flawed roster. She came to win. And if the Indiana Fever are serious about building a contender around her, then they have to stop making soft decisions. Keeping Natasha Howard would be a soft decision. Let's cut through the noise. Natasha Howard is not the scapegoat. She's not the villain. She's not being disrespected. She's simply not the right fit. And that matters more than anything. Her role last season didn't amplify the team's strengths. It exposed their flaws. And those flaws were on repeat every single night. Take a player like Caitlin Clark, who manipulates defenses with ball movement and tempo. What she needs around her is not just shooting, but decision makers. Players who understand how to play within the rhythm she creates. Players who finish the play, not restart it. Howard's tendency to over-dribble, to go one-on-one when there was no advantage, or to take a mid-range shot with 17 seconds on the clock. That's not just bad offense, it's system sabotage. And this is what separates elite front offices from mediocre ones. The ability to say this isn't working and do something about it. The Fever front office, for all its praise after landing Clark, has to own the rest of the blueprint. Signing Natasha Howard in the first place showed a lack of strategic thinking. They were trying to force veteran presence into a modern system that demanded spacing and fluidity. They bet on experience over fit, and they lost. The result? A clogged defense. Defensive schemes that ignored Howard on the perimeter and jammed the paint. Clark often had nowhere to go. And when she did find daylight, when she delivered perfect skip passes or hit a cutter in stride, the finish just didn't follow. That's not just frustrating, it's deflating. Every wasted possession chips away at momentum. Every missed open shot from the corner kills energy. And when that becomes a pattern, you start losing games. Not because your star isn't good enough, but because the team around her isn't tailored to her strengths. That's what makes this offseason so critical. The Fever can't afford to waste another year trying to make poor fits work. They have to be aggressive. They have to be bold. And that means moving on from players, yes, even veterans who aren't built for this phase of the franchise. Howard has options. She could bring value to a slower-paced team that needs leadership, rebounding, and a presence in the post. But that's not who the Fever are anymore. They're not in rebuild mode. They're in go mode. And the roster should reflect that. Clark's arrival changes everything. Her window is now. And while she's only in her early years, the WNBA isn't the NBA. There's no luxury of drawn-out timelines. Players hit their peak fast, and teams that hesitate get left behind. You don't wait 5 seasons to figure it out. You figure it out now. That's why players like Ezra Stevens are being talked about as the ideal fit. She's tall. She stretches the floor. She can guard multiple positions. She doesn't need the ball in her hands to make an impact. That's exactly the kind of player who would thrive next to Clark, because she complements, not competes. It's not even just about shooting, either. It's about defensive flexibility. Howard, for all her effort, didn't move well enough on switches. She got caught in mismatch after mismatch, and it forced the Fever to cover up for her defensively in ways that pulled other players out of position. That compounds problems. It doesn't solve them. And if the front office is still thinking about running it back with this same core, they're not watching the tape. You can't build a team around Clark and ignore how defenses respond to her. She's the kind of player that warps the floor. That demands double teams. That forces rotations. If the players on the receiving end of those rotations can't capitalize, either by hitting a shot, driving the closeout, or making the next pass, then you're playing 4-on-5. Every possession. Howard, last season, was that weak link. Not because she isn't talented, but because her skill set doesn't belong in this system. It's a basketball issue, not a personal one. The irony is it takes more respect to admit this than to avoid it. Because pretending a player is still contributing just to avoid making a tough call, that's not respect, that's neglect. Of the team, of the fans, of the star you're building around. Clark is watching. And you better believe she knows what's working and what's not. She's seen the passes that don't turn into points. She's seen the lanes that close before she gets to the rim. She's seen the defenders sag off her own teammate, daring them to shoot and daring the Fever to keep pretending it's fine. And she's not going to say it publicly. She's too smart for that. But the front office has a responsibility to do what she can't. Act. Act decisively. Act wisely. And act with the future in mind. Howard has done a lot in this league. She's earned her respect. But that's exactly why the Fever should allow her to take that experience elsewhere, somewhere her game fits better, somewhere she can contribute in the right role, without being forced into a system that highlights her weaknesses instead of her strengths. Because staying here, in this role, is doing neither party any favors. This team has to evolve. The game demands it. The WNBA is faster, smarter, and more efficient than ever. And teams that ignore those shifts, they don't just lose games, they lose relevance. That's not where the Fever want to be. That's not where Clark should be. So here it is. The choice is right in front of them. Do you hold on to a player who no longer fits, hoping things magically improve next season? Or do you make the call, free up that cap space, and bring in someone who actually amplifies the franchise player you just built your identity around? The answer should be obvious. Let Howard walk. Thank her for her leadership. Recognize her past contributions. But stop pretending this works. This isn't just a basketball decision. It's a message. To Clark, to the fans, to the league, that the Fever aren't afraid to make the moves that winning teams make. That they're not going to let loyalty or fear hold them back. That they understand the opportunity they've been given with Clark and are ready to build something that matters. The Fever have a generational passer, a franchise centerpiece, a marketing engine, but none of that means anything if the team around her doesn't fit. No more soft decisions. No more waiting. No more debt for Clark to carry that she didn't ask for. It's time to build the roster she deserves. Every moment the Indiana Fever hesitate is another moment wasted in the Caitlin Clark era. Every possession where the offense stalls because of poor spacing or bad shot selection is one more example of a roster still stuck in the past. And if the front office refuses to act, if they once again play it safe and bring back Natasha Howard, it won't be Clark who pays for it. It'll be the entire franchise. This isn't about blame. It's about building smart. And Howard, for all her leadership and history in this league, represents a version of basketball that no longer works next to Clark. A version that slows the pace, clogs the lane, and gives defenses an easy out. A version that, quite simply, doesn't belong in the modern WNBA when your offense is run by a 6-foot sniper with no-look passing and elite basketball IQ. Clark is one of the most gifted floor generals this league has seen in years. She creates advantages just by crossing half court. She sees plays 2 steps ahead. But all of that vision means nothing if her teammates can't capitalize. And last season, too often, Natasha Howard didn't. When defenders sagged off Howard, daring her to shoot, they weren't just playing the odds. They were exposing a structural flaw in the Fever's design. That 18% from beyond the arc wasn't a slump. It was a scouting report. Teams read it. They exploited it. And they will keep exploiting it if nothing changes. That's not a knock on Howard's effort. It's not a question of toughness or will. It's just basketball. And in today's basketball favors shooting, spacing, and role definition. Clark provides the shooting and the playmaking. But she needs support. Teammates who know where to be, when to cut, and how to finish without hesitation. Howard tried to do too much. Transition possessions where she led the break. Half-court sets where she initiated the offense. Pull-ups with time on the clock. That's not what this system needs. And it's not a role she should have been asked to play. That's where the blame shifts to the front office. They built this team. They brought in a veteran whose resume looked good on paper, but who didn't actually complement their biggest asset. That's the kind of mistake that turns into a pattern. That's the kind of oversight that turns a promising young core into a middle-of-the-pack treadmill team that never really contends. This isn't just about Natasha Howard. It's about a larger problem, how the Fever make decisions. If they re-sign her, they're telling the fan base they're afraid to move on from mistakes, that they value familiarity over fit, that they're more concerned with what a player used to be than what they currently are. And that's a dangerous precedent for a franchise trying to climb back into relevance. Because the rest of the league isn't waiting. Teams are getting smarter. They're optimizing lineups. They're investing in players who stretch the floor, defend multiple positions, and understand their role. That's the blueprint. And if the Fever want to win in this era, they have to follow it. That means targeting players like Ezra Stevens. She checks every box: size, shooting, mobility, defense. She doesn't need touches to impact the game. She doesn't dominate the ball. She plays within structure. That's exactly the kind of player who would elevate Clark's game, and by extension, the entire offense. And it's not just offense. A player like Stevens gives you flexibility on defense, too. Switchable lineups, more zone options, less help from the perimeter. That matters in a league full of elite guards and versatile forwards. Howard, for all her hustle, couldn't provide that versatility. She was too often the weak link on a switch, forcing rotations that opened up the floor for opponents. That kind of exposure can't continue. Not if the Fever want to be taken seriously. The path forward is clear. Move on. Use the roster spot and cap space to bring in a modern forward who fits Clark's style. Let Howard explore opportunities with teams that match her skill set. She can still contribute, but not here. Not in Indiana. Not in a system that demands something different. And if the front office can't make that decision, then what does that say about their commitment to winning? You don't get many chances to build around a player like Caitlin Clark. The clock is already ticking. Her prime is limited. Her impact is massive. And her presence is a gift that has to be handled with care and urgency. There's no room for nostalgia. No time for loyalty contracts. No space for players who can't execute within the offense. The Fever have one job: build a team around Clark that can compete at the highest level. And every move they make, or fail to make, will either support that goal or sabotage it. Howard's time in Indiana should be over. That doesn't mean she failed. It means the team is evolving, and she no longer fits that evolution. That's not cruelty. That's reality. And the longer the front office waits to face it, the further they fall behind. Clark's vision, her playmaking, her gravity, none of it will reach its full potential until the players around her can meet the moment. The Fever owe it to her, to the fans, and to the franchise's future to stop pretending otherwise. So what's it going to be? Let us know how you see it playing out. Should the Fever finally cut ties and pivot to a more modern build? Or do you think there's still value in keeping Howard around? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like if you're ready for a stretch 4 revolution in Indiana. Share this with the W fans who've been calling this out since Game 1. And subscribe for more real talk as the Fever decide whether they're here to play or here to win.